Alright, let's see what we can do here as far as a relatively quick Aurora Borealis type of scene, okay? I'm going to be working on some... Oh, I could do this on the glossy side of my paper, but I think I'm going to stick with the matte. And some of my hybrid inks again. Kind of in a deep dive, kind of experimental, I don't know, phase with these stamp pads, ink pads. And, I don't know, different kind of scenarios come to mind when I think about them. I'm thinking about them in terms of what they can do, and also what I think, or what I found, they can't do so well. And then I want to know if there's kind of a good solution to that, or a workaround. So, on this one here, I just want to try this kind of Aurora Borealis type of look, and just to see how much depth I can achieve with it. Okay, so what I'm getting at is my last scene. I found that once I got into, I don't know, several different layers of colors, okay, it really starts to get built up on the paper, you know, because these inks are part pigment ink, so they're laying on the surface. So if I go like this with this first color right here is yellow, and because I'm just working on a bare piece of paper, it applies fine, but when these colors start really stacking up and they're moist, when I try to add in other colors on the top of them, you're almost kind of wiping off what you've applied underneath, all right? And I want to see what I can do about that, or just how I can get those darker colors on there. And I don't want to use less of the lighter colors, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll heat set in this video. I'm not quite sure. We'll just see how things are going when I get to those darker tones, which won't be anytime too far in the future. Because this one is done right here, and as I work through these colors, we'll just kind of start building them up more and more. Okay, so anyways, Aurora Borealis, Northern Lights, what you do is you leave some of these streaks right here of light, meaning I'm kind of streaking down like this, and see I'm leaving some areas just as is. Well, I mean, it has a little bit of yellow on there, but kind of you want to leave some of the lightness of the paper. You'll see these kind of the lighter areas kind of start to reveal themselves a little bit more the darker I go, because there'll be more contrast created with the darker values that I'll be using. And I'm just using paper towels, okay, or a paper towel, wadded up one. And you noticed that I am turning my paper in a direction that is the most conducive for me for this type of motion I'm doing, okay? So as I'm doing this, I'm kind of moving my arm as well like this, okay? And just keeping it nice and ergonomic. Use your kind of your whole body, and use it, the different parts of your body, in a manner in which it is the most kind of natural motion for whatever mark you're adding. Especially if it's a repetitive mark. If I'm just doing this once, it's not going to matter, but when you're doing something repetitively, you really want to you know, be mindful of your kind of body position. All right. Try some pink. I'm just working through kind of a general spectrum. Okay, now I've done this type of thing many times on my videos. If you just kind of bring up my channel, Stampscapes, click on, if you just kind of happen across this, you just click on the, and if you're not real familiar with YouTube, you just click on Stampscapes and it'll bring you up my entire channel, and then you'll see this little magnifying glass, this search capability. And it's usually, I don't know what it is on every device, but it's usually a little magnifying glass, and it'll just search my channel, but bring up something like Northern Lights, and you'll see this kind of technique being done with usually dye-based inks. So you can do it in dye-based inks. I mean, something like this would be beautiful in something like pan pastels or something like that. I haven't seen, I don't know if I've seen oxides in this, maybe. I don't know if I've seen a technique just solely using something like pigment inks. I don't know if anyone have like a big collection of pigment inks? Usually with pigment inks, I don't know if people are doing a lot of just coloring only with pigment inks. I don't know. I usually don't see people with like a gigantic line of like color box or something like that. All right, kind of getting there. I have something in mind for this kind of color scheme that I'm working on. I have this quote stamp here that I was thinking about using. I need to be careful about what I say I'm going to use in the beginning of a video, because so often I change course during the video. You know, I thought I was going to use a certain stamps, or, you know, combinations of various things, and kind of when you start moving into things, you know, it's quite possible that something comes along, or you're just, you know, the piece just doesn't seem to, you know, suit the original concept anymore, so you just change course and don't use them. So that's one thing about kind of exploring. I generally think that's a pretty good mindset to go into something. You know, just think of something like you're going to do an experiment, you know, without any, you know, real definitive kind of end result. And it opens up the possibilities for variation and for changing your mind. So, you know, I mean, you might be copying some of their, lesson or something like that, or card that someone's made. They've used this, this, and this until you see the instructions on their blog or something like that, and that's really good. But, you know, I mean, just in general, with any creative endeavor, I would really encourage you to, you know, kind of be open to variation. Or what you might do is you might try to follow along with something and try to replicate it, but then maybe do it again and see what comes up, see if there's any kind of variations or other options that maybe come to mind. Or you can do this technique right here, and I'll use a couple stamps that I have in mind for it, but, you know, maybe do this background, but use other stamps over the top of it next time. Or, you know, your first time, whatever. You know, this, you can do any kind of background and stamp scenic stamps over the top of it, and, you know, it'll give you a nice composition. We've done things where we've done photo stamping before, where we're using a real set background. There's a lot of variation that can take place, but you know, certain things get established. People have done brayered backgrounds for really quick cards and stamp things over that. Really great technique. Fast one if you have multiple cards to do, Christmas cards or something like that, you know, or you're someone that stamps out cards for donating to, you know, various charities that give things out. You might want to do 20 cards. I wouldn't want to do 20 of this card, but a brayered background with, you know, a few stamps on it, and you know, quote stamp or something like that, and you know, a few little embellishments to make it really nice, but quick is a really good way to go. Okay, now here's what I'm finding out. Okay, now see, it starts to really build up right in here. I'm getting a little bit of texturing, which is fine with me. But anyways, what we did was we worked through yellows, oranges, reds, pinks, you know, around the gamut of that spectrum. But here's what I like about these hybrids, and I find it fascinating, is, okay, now, yellow was the first one that we used. It's sunshine yellow, okay? But now, I mean, I could go back over, if I did this all in dye-based inks, I could go over it again with yellow, and it works a little bit differently, but this, let's go back to this yellow here, and I'm just curious to know if bringing this in here now, and I've changed tips, I'm not going to put yellow on this, but I'm going to be curious. Now see, that really makes a big difference. Look at that, this is one, and this is the other. I'm sure I'm blending in some of that darker tone into it, but look at that difference right there. I mean, that makes a huge difference there. It's digging back into that color right there. It's like removing it. I don't know, digging in maybe is not the right description, but so see, this is the type of thing that I have to kind of figure out and learn about to maximize it. Look at that glow that's happening right there, and let's take a look at this side. And this side looks okay, but that side looks much, much better, doesn't it? So it's more of this circular process, and I always talk about that in dye-based inks, but it's especially true for just media that happens to be kind of more surface-oriented, you know, in terms of the application. Let's do something like that. Look at that glow that's happening right there. And let's go ahead and put this over this whole thing. Okay, now here's where I start to feel this certain type of effect with hybrid inks, okay? When I start building it up, I'm moving around ink on the surface here. And that's interesting for me because dye-based inks stain, and you can kind of drag them along a little bit, but it's a lot more apparent with this. Now look at that. Okay. See, I do something like that, and it's really kind of, it's getting right into that page now. I'd probably use it in a better cardstock. I wouldn't get that kind of pebbling like that, but I really don't mind that texture. I think it's okay. If not, you know, even more interesting than not having it, I don't know. Now let's go back to purple. Let's just use a new piece of the paper towel here, okay? About like so. Let's go into this kind of darker purple, violet, whatever. Apply that on. I really like these different types of looks right here. And of course I haven't even used the white in these pads yet. I'm getting to that. So just kind of going back in and staying, I think I mentioned in my last video, I almost feel like I don't know, I almost feel like I'm applying some like shoe polish or something, you know, to to the surface. And see, what I'm doing here is real similar to that last video, if you've watched these videos. This. Okay, this is sideways. It's like the sideways version of this. Just going to use a little bit of a refresher right at the top. I didn't add a lot after I did the impressions on here because they were wet, but I could probably do a little streak of yellow in there just to give that a little bit of a zap of tone. All right, let's go to black here. Let's see if this will influence the surface. I don't know. Sometimes it's dark, but this is really wet here, so let's see if it applies. Yeah, it does. It'll be a little bit of a different experience depending on the relative kind of humidity of an area that you're in, how fast these inks are drying, or or how relatively slow they're drying. I don't know. It depends on where you're at. Wow, that black really worked out. I wasn't quite sure if it would apply or not because like that purple didn't seem to be applying too much. Look at my fingerprints right there. That edge is really wet. When I work with these, my fingertips tend to get pretty inky. Okay, not too bad. It didn't take too long at all. This is a half-page piece of paper too, so pretty big in terms of my format. Bigger than your usual card, but I don't know. When I'm doing these types of freeform backgrounds, I really like having the kind of real estate to kind of apply these, and I don't know. It's just like having a larger canvas to do those movements. I enjoy doing the the smaller quarter piece before, but I don't know, I feel I can get more kind of texturing in this one. Okay, let's try some of that white pigment ink in here. Alright, this is the part that I really have to learn and get kind of this feel down better with this one, at least in comparison to my previous video. But alright, so I'm starting with a fresh piece like this. Alright, and let's go into the... Let me do this. I'll put a little bit of my yellow onto this, and then I'll go into some of my white like this, okay? Just to get some kind of mixture of the two inks, and I'm going to try to create this kind of extended flame up here. Here's the thing though, see, as I swipe up there, I'm getting the dark color, so if I go back in here for a second swipe, I'm adding this darker tone from up there back into here, so it's almost like I have to kind of use a fresh area like this and just start down here and streak up like that, and maybe make that the final pass. It's, or I don't know, just don't, yeah, see, if I go too much, I'm bringing this darker tone into it, so. It wipes right off, though, I'm fine, okay. But I don't like kind of inking up like this in general, and having one pass to go, you know, because then I'm losing all that ink that I've already applied here. Perhaps a different applicator would be better, I don't know. Okay, let's see, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. I go into this darker area. The darker area won't matter, because it'll still be lighter than the darkest of areas. It's kind of, I don't know if you've ever painted before, it's like putting your brush and mixing a couple things together. That's what it feels reminiscent to me. Looks more like brushwork to me when I start doing things like that. See that? That's that white in there. And this is what it looks just like without the white. You have all that kind of texturing of the paper like that. But this is kind of interesting. Does that look purple there? You can really see the purple now. I don't know if I wipe down, you know, beneath the surface or whatever, but you know, just really different. Okay. Got a really dark right blotchy area right there. Alright, we've lost a lot of the lighter area though, haven't we? Let's try this. Let's try a little cotton ball with some of this white. And lay some of this down in here, like so. Okay. Let's see what I can do. If I can. Kind of adding a little bit of a lighter element. And maybe perhaps a lighter touch. Okay. Okay, this seems to be doing it. I'm just kind of adding this in the lighter area. The yellow. What was the yellow? Now I've gone into the darker, but okay, this is what I'm missing here. The white tends to dull things out, okay? It's like if you add whites to things, they become much more pastel. So here's what I'm doing here that's working. I'm going back in now with this yellow over the top of it and kind of brightening it up again. Like that. Okay. Yeah. Now see, this is what I'm having to get used to. I forgot about this aspect, even just from a few minutes ago. Okay, so see that down there? Look at that. Okay, now we have black in there. Okay, now with this kind of glowing kind of aspect in mind, let's go back to this red. And you don't need that many paper towels. This is like one paper towel that I'm still on. I'm using it probably in little quarters or eighths. Okay, this is the red. Mars red. Look at that. There's a lot of dimension to it, isn't it? Right? You know, when we talk about kind of that layering of color and layering of, it's bringing out the intensity. So, circular process, you kind of add in, go back to lighter tones, add more of something. How about pink? Milky Way magenta, okay. Not pink. Top looks a little pinkish though. I'm never going to learn these names. It's like too late. My brain's filled up with too many things to remember. I lost my memory when I started this. Started Stampscapes years ago. I started forgetting everything just because I had to remember other things in daily life. Okay, that was that. Okay, so I went with the darks, right? Now let's go back to that yellow again. Okay. Look at that glow that happens. It's really fun kind of watching it. Let's see if I can really make some of these areas up here really stand out with the yellow. Seems like you can. Okay, this is the darkest area possible, right? Let's see if... Even that over there, I mean, it looks pretty rich, right? Okay. Enough with that. Let's get into with the imagery. That was really fun, though. Or... Okay, there's a lot of texture in here. Let's do this. I'm going to make this... Oh, let me see. Okay, let me think about the process here. Okay, I'm thinking about this. Love must be a light as well as a flame. If I stamp that here... I'd have to do it in light. Light. Let me do it in hero hues. No, I wonder if I can do it. That's pigment ink, okay? It's really translucent. I'm thinking about brilliance. Maybe brilliance white. That might be a better bet if I can find it now on my desk. In the meantime, I have too many pads on my desk at this point in time, if there's such thing. It's too many pads in terms of finding things. Let me put this on pause. Oh, no wonder. I moved it. I moved it off my desk because had so many pads built up here. Okay, now the Brilliance is a pigment ink that has a reputation for, and I guess it's been designed to be used on surfaces where you want that to dry quickly. Okay, so things like glossy cardstock, it dries really, nicely, and I don't know, like with all pigment inks, I wish they were a little bit more opaque. Okay, this is just stamped on black paper, but it looks more like a gray than like a pure white. I don't know what it would take to create a pigment ink pad, white, that would really be really stark white, opaque, kind of neutral white maybe. But it would have to be something like that's in the bleed-proof white, but bleed-proof white, it dries so fast, so if you had it in pad form, it would just, our pads would be dry all the time, unless you can kind of spray it maybe with like a spray or something. Okay, love must be a light, as well as... I'm planning on doing some bleed-proof white splatter painting on here, but if I did that, underneath this, it creates kind of a pebbled surface with this paint built up on there, and sometimes I don't get a crisp impression. So, I wanted to stamp the quote first, but isn't that kind of interesting? In fact, that alone would be kind of an interesting card just as is. It's just, although this is all the flame, I have my light to go on here. But just in terms of a graphic statement, in terms of kind of just having a background like this and one quote on there or something like that, Be kind of an interesting Valentine's Day card or something like that, talking about something like flame or something like that. Okay, so this is my lighthouse, and I'm working with a really small pad here, but I seem to be able to do my large stamps on them. I just, kind of rotate it around and get it on there. Okay, so the hybrid ink I find works just fine on top of hybrid inks. Okay, so I don't think, but I haven't tested it, I don't think dye inks would stamp out well over the top of pigment inks. Don't quote me on that, or hybrid inks. I don't know, though. I think what I've found so far is I don't need to hold this down and have that ink transfer. It seems to transfer just fine, but I don't know. I'm always used to doing this with dye-based inks because they're thinner. And if you have kind of a wet cardstock, I like to use glossy a lot. It's sometimes if you you go in for your impression and you pull up too soon, it creates kind of a vacuum and you pull a lot of the ink off with it before it transfers over. But I don't know. I probably need to adjust for that. Okay, so anyways, yeah, it gives you a pretty good impression on top of that. And this is just like cheap cardstock too. This is good glossy cardstock, but I'm just using the back of it where it is non-coated, so it works out pretty well. I think if I was working with a good cardstock too, I wouldn't get that pebbling on the surface when I'm doing those backgrounds. But I don't know. Sometimes we like texture, just like watercolors like a lot of texture in their pieces. Okay, I've got some paper towel on this. Pull some of that off, some crumbs. Okay, that was the lighthouse. This is light rocks and waves. This is rocks and waves. I'm going to use those in conjunction with one another. I'm going to overlap my previous impression by, I don't know, it's like a 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch or so. There's a lot of leeway. If you're working with unmounted versions of these, just overlap sufficiently. We're talking, you can even overlap them a 1/2 inch, okay? So you don't have to be exact, but don't try to match up edge to edge. Otherwise you get a bunch of gaps in between. They're all meant to be overlapped with one another. They're solid and tonal images, so everything has been designed for ease of use, which means little to no masking, okay? Okay, I'm going to try something here. Why not? We're talking about experimentation. I haven't used my cloud with these hybrid inks yet. There's a lot of fine detail in here, and I don't want that to get clogged up, okay? So, I think there's a piece of my hair on here or something. I don't want to gross people out, but I don't know, it could have been just a piece of the paper towel too. All right, now you don't have to stamp this out in black. In fact, let me switch up here. Sorry, folks, experimenting here. It's not an exact thing. I'm thinking about these things as I'm doing this, so it's kind of speaking out loud kind of give me the idea. I'm going to stamp this in one of those colors instead of doing it in black, just so that it doesn't compete so much with this foreground. Okay, so let's go with one of the darker tones that we used in this color scheme here. I'm thinking of a darker one, like maybe I don't know, one of those purples, but how about the asteroid umber? It's kind of the brownish tinge in there. Let's see how that looks. I really like this so far, so it's one of those things I just kind of mention to people, that kind of might be a little bit kind of reluctant to stamp something. I always just say go for it and test it out. Okay, let me get that. I'm kind of getting that idea of how dark that might be. This is one of the things too. These are brand new pads. So they're super juicy. So I want to be careful that I don't over ink it, which might happen too because of all the tight detail, and these hybrid inks are probably going to be thicker. They don't feel too much thicker than dye-based inks though. Yeah, let me blot this out. Okay, so here's what you do on sky images, especially for a situation like this. You don't always have to do this, like with dye-based inks if you're doing it in a light color, but I'm blotting a good 1/2 inch around in here and kind of blotting off some of this because it's too juicy. And I'm going to, let's try it over here. Okay, well, let's go right here. I'm not masking because I kind of wiped off the side, but we'll see if I wiped off enough. And let's see if this is dark enough now, because I wiped off some off the images too. Okay, that looks pretty good. It works just like dyes. Okay. In fact, it's a lot lighter than I thought. I almost used the black here. Okay, let's do the same thing. Can you see how juicy that is? There we go. See that? It's really puddled up right in here, all that kind of texturing in the kind of not solid area, but a little bit more. Let's see if I can get this on camera. Okay, wiping off right around here. And if you're going with a darker tone like that, kind of wiping off. But now see in here, let's go in here. See how it's much more flat and not puddled up in there? Okay, so let's go about a ½ inch around into the scene, or image, and then really take off a good perimeter part of it, okay? Now you don't know, like I said, if I'm doing this in dye-based inks and whatnot, you don't have to do that for every, every time you do the impression. This is just kind of a specialized. Now see this where I'm stamping it out over this? It's stamping right over the top of that and into those rocks down here. But hopefully I've wiped off enough of it where it doesn't matter. See, I didn't really need to mask off my lighthouse because it's stamping it out in a lighter tone that's been wiped off too, so no big deal. Let's put another one right out here. So 3 impressions, but they're very subtle impressions, right? You don't always have to do everything in black, in terms of your imagery. That's one of the things that's different about landscape stamping. You can stamp things in different colors. A lot of what we're used to doing with a lot of different types of stamping, where they're outline images that we kind of color in, is we're used to stamping out all of the imagery in black. But this is just doing, stamping it out in a color, so, for strategic purposes. In this case, if it's a lighter tone, it looks kind of farther away in the distance. Darker things come close, lighter things are more distant, just in general. Doesn't mean it has to be like that, but just from a visual standpoint. Okay, so there's another one. See how those all kind of merged together? Didn't have to mask it at all. Let's go for another. Let's see if we can get a faint impression up here using a second impression. I don't know if it'll stamp out or not. Yeah, okay, it did. See that right up there? So really light. All right. Okay, so that was another thing, a new thing that I've done this time around. I've stamped out what's images has the tightest detail, I think, in Stampscapes line with kind of those thicker inks, but I think it would have looked really blotchy had I not wiped it off with this first, so, just keep that in mind. Especially, if you're getting new pads of any sort, they're hopefully going to be very, very juicy. Okay, look at my cardstock right here. I always recommend getting 12-point. This is 10-point cardstock, and with the ink buildup on here, it really starts to, become very bowed. You just counter bow it like that, and it's fine. But I just assume not have to do that. It thicker paper really feels nice too. Okay, let's spread some of my paper out here for the next technique applied to the piece. All right, Dr. Martens. Oh, my brush here. I need to wash off my brush. Okay, we have a clean, used toothbrush here, and some Dr. Martens bleed-proof white, opaque white watercolor paint. Okay, and let's see if I don't think I need to add any water to it. Usually you do, unless you're using it all the time. It almost becomes like a cake of watercolor that needs to be, you need to add water to every time you use it. Okay, so kind of wiping this off. I'm trying to avoid kind of a big blob of paint coming out, so you really have to kind of be mindful of that. Or just, I'll show you what technique to do too. Sometimes I go through all those preliminaries and, oh, I just got, exactly what I just said not to get. But what you can do is you can splatter from off, over, not over the top of this card, to avoid a, big blob of paint if it does blob on you, you know, because you didn't take off enough. Okay, let's see what we can do here in terms of technique. Let me turn this way so you can see more of it as it happens. Okay. Zoom in a little bit. And let me show you what I'm doing here too. Okay, now these are supposed to represent stars. Okay, you see that? But we have these crashing waves down here too, and what I like to do, or waterfalls or something like that, it's really fun, is just to bring some of that little splashing kind of action down this way. Here. I kind of like this dynamic of this little, of textures being similar in some kind of land element as the sky, because it's almost like there's splashes here, and visually it's like those splashes become the stars as it transitions up into the sky. Now you don't have to go like that and just get this whole thing. I'm just kind of releasing like one or two hairs at a time of my toothbrush. So I'm barely moving my thumb on this. It's just like, you know, micromillimeter at a time, as like one or two of the bristles kind of releases from that. So anyways, this is what that looks like down here. Now, on this one, I suspect that some of this might be too kind of extreme with that white, especially because I don't have anything else that's really white in here. So I'm going to add a little bit more, and I'll show you what I do with some of these dots afterwards, especially down here in the water. Okay, this bleed-proof white is kind of a chalky white. And that being said, it's very open to accepting other media. So I can go in here and I can tone some of those out. So we can make some of them yellow or red or pink or whatever. Kind of colors that are, you know, within our composition. Okay? All right, I think that's enough. Definitely sufficient, if not too busy, but this is where some of those additional coverage comes into play. All right, now this sets up pretty fast, but I'd probably recommend, you know, waiting a little bit more than what I'm going to do here. But let's go in with some. Let's try this pink one right here. Okay. What I do is I like to get like a nice flat applicator like this, and then I just kind of flatten it down a little bit more like that. Okay, now let's see if I can kind of tone some of these stars a little bit. See that now some of them are pink, right? I wouldn't wipe too much, otherwise I think these stars will wipe right off, so you can just kind of tint them a little bit. And use multiple, you can go do multiple passes. You don't have to do just all pink. Okay, let's put some of this down here. Let's try some Let's try some yellow. Maybe I can go over some of that pink, you know, kind of mix those two kind of overlays. I mean, if you've gone too extreme in some area, you can probably just go over it with black or something like that, and the dots would be gray. Okay. Orange, whatever, red. Here's some red. I'll hold this up so you can see. Okay, so let's take a look at the color of some of these dots. There's purple, pink, red. How about some red right in here? That's too yellowish, huh? Or is that, no, that was magenta, sorry. Anyways, okay, so some of that's wet. That'll kind of merge in a little bit more together. When it's dry, let's take a look at this. Okay, I think that some birds are in order. Let me go find my gulls, stamp my seagulls. Alright, this gulls stamp. Let's go pretty bold on this one because I have that cloud texture down there, so let's just go with the black. Sometimes you stamp out your birds in a lighter tone and they're more distant. In this case, let's go bold because this is the thing that's distant, so if the birds are closer to us than the lighthouse, all right? Although if they were the same distance or behind there, they would be like, you know, pterodactyls or something like that, but so let's go dark with this. Decide where to go. You can just kind of move it around. You can stamp it like that, and then figure out, kind of get that in your mind about where you want it to go in terms of placement. It's kind of like something like this. Nice light, even pressure. Don't stamp it with the same pressure that you did with your lighthouse and rocks. Okay, it's a very small image with very little surface area, so you don't want to use the same pressure that you did with big stamps because the distribution of surface area and that pressure would be much greater on a stamp with very little surface area, in this case rubber. Okay. Alright, now what's missing on this? Do you see it? The light in there, right? So let's go in here with, let's try let's see if this is working. I think my yellow uniball might not have been working very well. One of these wasn't. Here's another one. Let's hope. Okay, good. Okay, great. All right, so coming into my lighthouse. Ooh, one of the things I feel is that this is definitely not like writing or applying on a piece of paper or even on dye-based inks, there's a little bit of a resistance because of the amount of pigment ink that's lying down in that space. But it applies if you just kind of work with it a little bit. Okay, so there's that white. See how that kind of stands out a little bit more? But let's take and add a little white to it. Yeah, that yellow gel's still a little bit wet, so nothing's applying. Okay, let me try my white paint pen. This is an acrylic white paint pen. I have two of these. One of these is really shaken up and ready to go, and one of them I haven't shaken up quite enough yet. Okay, this one's the new one. It has that little ball inside. That paint inside needs to be mixed up much more. Okay, so let's try this one right here. I just want to kind of introduce a little bit of tone into that. Just so it's a little bit of a lighter yellow, even though it's pretty light to begin with, but I want to dilute it even more, taking it a little bit kind of closer in the direction of white light. Alright, so that is that. Let's create a little bit more of a varied surface background. With this image stamped out in that white brilliance, it's translucent. The colors underneath are showing through, but it's still kind of standing out a little bit visually. So what I'm doing is I'm introducing a little bit more of this kind of white translucent element to the scene, okay, in the form of these dots. Maybe we can make like a little Milky Way here. I go like so. See that? Oh, do you know what would look great in this one? Alright, let me see if my Zig pen's still working. I do have some other gold metallic pens, but let's see if this one of these wasn't working anymore. This pen's like 20 years old or something. Yeah, it's still working. Golden color scheme, right? So why not do some kind of little gold? Oh, my tip here is completely loose. That's what it was. I'll barely touch it to the paper. Ah, it's coming out. These pens do work pretty well when they're not broken like this. Well, even when broken, it works pretty decently. These little gold highlights are really fun because they're reflective of the light, so it might not be very apparent, especially if you use them in an area where the background is the same value, you know, light and dark, of the gold color, but then when you hold it up to the light, it gives you that extra little kind of element, reflective element. Okay. Let's see here. I don't know if this is going to work, especially over the top of I'm trying to grab for. All right, here, I'm going to try to grab for my This is a metallic. I haven't used a lot of my metallics before. This is like brand new. This is a glitter shuttle art gel pen from my 180 color set, so you can imagine there's a lot of colors that I haven't used in here. Actually, that one looks great. All right, you're never going to be able to see this. I'll try to hold it up so we'll both see. Okay, maybe we'll be able to see that. I'm adding these little bits. There's 1, 2, 3 dots like this. Let me see if I. You can see where it's wet, but okay. Can you see? Yeah, see there how it's really reflective, like that. See that? It just kind of merges in the background, but then when you catch that light with it. Okay, so that type of thing. Those types of little things are really fun. I really like subtle additions to pieces that kind of only reveal themselves under, at certain angles, or, someone picks it up or whatever and is looking at it. You kind of reward them, as I always say, with a little extra thing that, they might not have seen it was in there. This will be really fun. I mean, you can add kind of a, not so realistic, but what I saw these like glitter stars that you can put in, little sticker stars that that type of star. Sorry, that type of thing. You can put a couple in here. It doesn't have to be. I don't know. At this point, this isn't really realistic, scene, but. You add those stars like that, like a 5-point star or whatever, and there's a whimsical element to it. It's really, it kind of adds this kind of real friendly touch to it. Okay. So I like going and adding these little things like that. All right, this pen set also came with. There's all kinds of metallics. Or glitter. This one's a purple glitter. That one has no problem. But why not put, some purple glitter in here too? I'll put it in some of the darker areas. It's almost like using like a Wink of Stella pen or something. You can use a Wink of Stella on here too. This is kind of like in gel form. Yeah, that one's a dark dot in a lighter area. I'm trying to put this dark dot in the darker areas, so you get that little bit of reflective type of quality in the darker areas without having it stand out too much. Okay, let's see. Let's grab just a Q-tip, okay? I've already kind of frayed this one. I've probably used it before already. And we'll use some of the pigment ink. Just the white pigment ink from one of these pads. Okay, and I'm going to blot this off quite a bit. I don't want that. Real thick application of paint, okay? Now see, I put way too much on here because that's a brand new pad. So there's way too much ink on here. Let me just try to roll some of it off. You want it to where you're barely applying it, where it really takes a lot of taps for it to even show up, right? And that's where you have a lot of control. People want this to this, like just going like this, and they go like this, and there's big blobs of paint everywhere. It would be like you dipping your tip into, I don't know, something very thick, like liquid paper or something like that, and applying it. But you want to really just a haze going for this type of look right here. So see this right here? It's like 12 taps, and you get that little glowing star now. Okay, so one tap here. You can't. There's nothing you can see, right? That's what you want. Okay, so that's 25 very light taps, and I have that little star there, and it glows, and you have complete control over it. So this is a really easy thing to do, but you just have to have the right consistency on the tip, okay? But let's do this little trail of glowing kind of stars, maybe. I guess you can make some of your gold ones glow, although they're not very light. They're kind of darker stars, unless they're capturing that light, you know, kind of reflecting the light if you hold it up at that angle. Okay, so see that right there? Isn't that kind of a nice little texture? I mean, this is something that barely shows, okay? Let's put a little bit around the light here in the lighthouse, just to kind of make it kind of glow a little bit. Okay, I need a little bit more, I think. This is getting kind of dry. Don't put a big blob of it though. Again, you know, just kind of take off some. Okay, here I forgot I'm putting it in here, but that's hybrid ink, so I'm kind of polluting my tip here a little bit. So those windows there are kind of glowing a little bit more now. Let's do something right here. Let's have some fun. Let's make one of these little things down here kind of glow. It's almost like, you know, the stars are kind of, you know, these waves are splashing and the stars are going up there, or the stars are kind of coming down here into the water. Something like that. See little glowing little bits like that. They're just, I don't know, it's like little wisps or something like that too. They're just little magical little glowing things. Okay, let's take a look here and see what we have. This is really starting to bow on me. It has a kind of a nice texture though. It's like leather or something. I don't know. This is definitely heavier of a piece of paper than what it was when I started because of all that ink buildup. Like, it's really noticeable. You know, think about all the moisture that's kind of in the pulp right here. But okay, let's take a close look and let's see if we can see some of those. You see that little gold one up there? And here's some of these. At this point in time, I'm not quite sure. Some of these are the ones that I've tinted. These little stars up here. You see that little gold bits out here. Don't even know where I've applied some of it. Okay, you can see that, like that purple one there. But see how it disappears like that? Okay, there's a lot of these that kind of show up where they're kind of invisible like that, but they kind of show up like that. So and I put some of them down here in the water too. But I don't know, what a fun kind of exploration here in terms of layers and the different media in here. Half-page scene, matte. I'm always kind of surprised at just how much depth can be achieved on matte cardstock. I thought it would have been much flatter than it is or can be, and this isn't even like a good cardstock either. It's just the backside of the glossy, so it's uncoated. I really should get some matte cardstock, but I don't know, fun stuff. And then again, the hybrid inks, you know, pigment inks, they're not going to give you a lot of depth at all, but I guess the hybrid inks can. And the fact that I can go back in with this like yellow through, you know, tones like that have already been applied and get that kind of glowing area is really fun too. So just a lot of I don't know, kind of a circular process of going light to dark to light again and dark into that and light into that. It doesn't seem to be in vain either. It seems to all kind of contribute to the overall look of the piece. And I didn't have any problem with the, the imagery in here. The clouds being stamped in a lighter form. I think these birds stand out pretty well against that background as well. Dr. Martin's over the top and whatnot, so I don't know, kind of a lesson in layering for me. Okay, so anyways, hope you enjoyed the scene. If you liked the video, hope you like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.